The comics industry has been no stranger to close calls over the years. The inception of some of the world's most famous fictional icons has come down to a knife edge more times than not. And the same goes for their ownership too. You only have to look at the many legal disputes that have arisen between Superman's creators and DC for confirmation of that. And it's not just a case of changes off the page having a profound effect on the medium either. Quite the opposite. Creative decisions that have gone on to define entire comic book universes very nearly didn't happen. And some of the world's most famous comic book storylines could have, in many respects, looked drastically different than the finished product. We all love a good alternate history or two. Scott and Josh's, for example, is the one where the Matrix trilogy is considered the finest of all time. But that's not happened, has it? And that's what makes them so great. Anyway, no medium more so than the comics one has set about exploring them so emphatically. With that in mind, I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here are 9 mind-blowing what-if scenarios that almost changed comics forever. Number 9. Marvel's talent doesn't leave for Image. As far as comics are concerned, the 90s were a pretty dreadful decade. Bizarre creative decisions, clone sagas, edgy and dated character designs, all found a home at both DC and Marvel during those years. And while the industry looked like it was on the rise, in the same way Wall Street did shortly before October 1929, a history reference, the numbers didn't do justice to the various internal calamities that were then engulfing the big two. Todd McFarlane, who had quickly established himself as one of the biggest artists in the industry, was growing increasingly frustrated in regards to editorial interference on his title. Compounding these worries further were Marvel's apparent unwillingness to pay substantial royalties to staff who'd created characters for the company. And so, in 1991, they left. A group who'd later go on to become the founders of Image Comics. Spawn Mania gripped the rest of the decade, and yeah, the rest is history. Had McFarlane et al. Chosen to stay at Marvel, however, there's every chance that the Exodus of 91 would never have occurred, meaning that the Image we all know and love may never have come to pass. Number 8. Bill Finger doesn't change Bob Kane's Batman concept. Although Bill Finger has finally started to get his name on Batman stuff again, it's come 75 years too late. The writer, who is very much the unsung hero of DC's heyday, created pretty much everything we know and love about the character today, right down to the iconic Batsuit itself. He came up with the name, the city, the villains, along with Jerry Robinson, all of it. We have the Batman we have today because of Bill Finger. And yet his one-time collaborator, Reed exploiter, Bob Kane, raked in all the plaudits for a staggeringly long amount of time. When Finger died in 1974 at the age of 59, the world didn't even know who he was. Kane waited literal years to acknowledge his involvement in creating the world's most popular superhero. And yet, somewhere out there exists a reality where Finger never even got involved with that creative process. Batman would have sported a dorky-looking red and black suit with mechanical wings, Bruce Wayne wouldn't exist, neither would most of his villains, and there's every chance that he wouldn't be a popular superhero either. Number 7. Jack Kirby stays at Marvel. Although Jack Kirby is more commonly known for his work on Marvel during the 60s, the proverbial king of comics actually switched allegiances in 1970 to join bad boy rivals DC. During Kirby's stint at DC, he created what would be known as the Fourth World Saga, a series of stories that would see the creation of key DC icons like Darkseid, Mr. Miracle, and Orion. Kirby unleashed his full potential during this period, crafting a universe of his own making that was indelibly connected to his own sci-fi style, one that had only bubbled underneath the surface during his stint at Marvel. Speaking of, Kirby left that company in protest, supposedly, of Stan Lee's burgeoning media profile, and also because of their attempts to get him to sign a new contract that would have prevented the writer from ever taking legal action against the company. If this wasn't the case, and Marvel were more enthusiastic in singing his praises, then there's every chance Kirby's Fourth World would never have come into being. Further to that, with Kirby still at Marvel, it's possible that the company's bumper bullpen era would have continued. Personally, I prefer Mr. Miracle. Darkseid is and all that. Number 6. Marvel don't sell their most profitable characters. It's the world's worst kept secret that Marvel weren't at all happy with the way in which Fox went about using the X-Men or the Fantastic Four. You know, hence why they just bought them like the absolute lads they are. They did have cause to be upset as well. Every single Fantastic Four feature has been pretty diabolical, and while the X-Men are back in everyone's good graces thanks to Deadpool and Logan, praise is somewhat offset by the fact that, had they been in the MCU, they'd be able to hang around with the Avengers. It's a reality of Marvel's own making, however. Faced with bankruptcy in the 90s, funny how that decade keeps cropping up, isn't it? The company sold most of the on-screen rights to their own characters to various studios and companies. Spider-Man, the X-Men, Daredevil, and of course the Fantastic Four all wound up in different places, and for a while at least, Marvel were fine with this. No one had predicted the meteoric rise of the comic book film as a force in Hollywood. But what if they hadn't been so quick to sell their licenses? Well, for starters, the MCU would look a heck of a lot more different. But there's also the fact that the comic book movie boom would have taken a completely different shape altogether, if it even took at all. Number 5. Tim Curry plays the Joker, and Mark Hamill doesn't. Batman the Animated Series stands today as the darkest and most intelligent use of the Batman license outside of the comics medium. Well, ever. But it wouldn't be what it is today without its voice actors. Kind of like this VO, if you think about it. Kevin Conroy's Batman and Mark Hamill's Joker are, without doubt, the two most definitive versions of the Dark Knight and the Clown Prince of Crime. Hamill in particular is totally unrecognisable in the role, crafting a voice and laugh that, while charming in many respects, was terrifying when it had to be. Luke Skywalker, eat your heart out. Strangely enough though, Hamill wasn't the actor originally meant for the part. Tim Curry, yes, have a balloon, Georgie, Pennywise himself, was actually meant to take the mic as Batman's arch-nemesis, and while rumours of his dismissal had floated around for years, the real reason for it was finally revealed last year. Hamill, originally booked in to play the part of Ferris Boyle in the critically lauded Heart of Ice, was asked to play the Joker only after Curry fell ill with a nasty case of bronchitis. The rumour until then had been that the producers had found his voice too scary for kids' TV, but to find out he lost the role due to being ill is, while admittedly anticlimactic, indicative of how close he came to being the B-Taz Joker. I can only speculate as to how Curry would have done the voice, having already played one creepy clown in Stephen King's It, but if finding out means losing Hamill's, then I never want to know. Number 4. Marvel's printing press copes with the demands of Grey Hulk. It really is incredible to think that the colour of one of Marvel's most iconic characters came down to a simple printing press malfunction. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had originally wanted Bruce Banner's famous alter ego to be coloured grey, but the company's printing press struggled to keep up with the demand, and imperfections began to crop up on page, with some panels having switched entirely from grey to green. Seeing this, and actually preferring the colour change because, you know, Green Hulk is cool, Lee and Kirby opted for a Green Hulk, birthing yet another modern Marvel and one of the most iconic looking images of the generation in the process. While said Grey Hulk would make further appearances down the line, as the Hulk's slightly brainier counterpart, had Marvel's press not messed up, he could have been the main man. While we've got nothing against Grey Hulk, the thought of a world without Marvel's Jolly Green Giant isn't one we want to be a part of. That might sound a bit dramatic, but seriously. Number 3. The public votes to save Jason Todd. The death of Jason Todd still stands out as being one of the industry's grimmest and most remarkable stories. Not that you'd ever want to read it. While the death in the family itself is a fairly unremarkable story, the external process that led to the second Robin's death stands out if anything because it's so grim. Unsure how to react to a burgeoning tide of hate mail being directed at Todd, DC opened up his fate to the public with a telephone poll. Readers could call one line to save Jason, while others could call the other to kill the boy blunder off. There was only ever going to be one outcome, and in Batman number 428, Todd and his mother were no more, bludgeoned by the Joker and left to die in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere. The now iconic panel of Batman holding Jason's corpse wasn't always meant to be, however. The difference in the vote was marginal, with a mere 72 votes deciding Todd's fate. If he had lived, then not only would we have been spared the Red Hood and the inconvenience of the Superboy Prime resurrection, the progression of the Bat family might have changed altogether. We might not even have had another Robin. Number 2. DC loses Superman. While the thought of a Superman-less DC universe is pretty hard to comprehend, it's come close to happening on more than one occasion. Created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Clark Kent is a man who needs no introduction. He gave birth to the modern superhero as we know it, made us believe a man could fly, and is pretty much the face of the medium today. The thought of him not being around to be that face is, quite frankly, bizarre. Or bizarro, if you want to be comic booky about it. But it's come close to happening plenty of times, with DC having duked it out with both Siegel and Shuster for pretty much every decade since the 40s in regards to who rightfully owns the character. Both creators sold their hero to DC prior to the Man of Steel's rapid ascent to stardom, and, feeling slightly aggrieved that they hadn't seen much income from it, went on to battle their former employers in the courtroom until their deaths. While no decision ever erred in favour of the creators or their families, All Soups has come close to becoming a universalist, creator-owned work as a result. Had a different ruling been handed down, Superman wouldn't be in the Justice League, and potentially would have been out of a film too. Number 1. Alan Moore uses Charlton Comics characters for Watchmen. Today, and probably when it was first released too, Alan Moore's Watchmen is heralded as the finest comic book of all time. It has a spot on Time's greatest novels of all time, being the only comic to register a place on the list, and it still provokes debate to this day. One thing that fans of the book might not know, however, is that Alan Moore had a very different vision in mind when he conceived of the Minutemen and their 80s counterparts. DC had recently acquired a bunch of Charlton Comics characters, one being Steve Ditko's The Question, and Moore, sensing an opportunity, wanted to use them in his deconstruction of the medium. Question was meant to take on the role of Rorschach, a fact that would be later lampooned in the character's own solo series a few years later. Blue Beetle was meant to be Night Owl, Silk Spectre was an imitation of Nightshade, and Captain Atom was meant to be Dr. Manhattan too. While the main beats of Moore's story would probably have stayed the same, using these characters in particular would have erased entire runs from the equation, particularly Questions, who's garnered his own cult following in the wake of his own seminal series and an appearance on Justice League 2. Good or bad, I think I like things the way they are, though this does come from a Question fanboy. And that's our list. Know of any other comic scenarios that came terrifyingly close to happening? Help this particular reality by letting us know in the comments below, and while you do, make sure to like, share and subscribe, and head back over to whatculture.com for more list-based goodness every day. I've been Ewan, and I'll see you next time, in a reality of your own choosing.